Hi guys, welcome back to the channel once again. My name's Peter and you're watching Thailand Bound. Okay, it's story time once again. I've got 4 stories lined up for you this morning. I don't know why it's 4 again. It's just turned out that way every week. Just fits into the time slot. Before we get into this week's story, I just want to give you a little bit of an update on the call out I did last week. If you remember, if you're a regular viewer and you watched last week, you'll remember that I put a call out for any Western women out there who have been to Thailand, fallen in love with a Thai man and come out worse for wear. It didn't work out because we get plenty of stories sent in by the guys, which I'm going to read for you today, similar sort of stories. And I just thought it'd be really interesting if we got a story from 1 or 2 Western women. Of course, I would keep it anonymous. I wouldn't give out names. I just thought it'd be interesting for myself and viewers. But as I say, it was last week. I haven't had any takers. So if you haven't been to this channel before and you're a Western woman and you've had that experience, send it in to me. My email address is in the description and I'll edit it a little bit and I'll put it out there anonymously. Okay, so let's get straight into these 4 stories. There's a couple of success stories here today. I won't tell you which ones because I don't want to give it away, but I've got a real treat for you. The first story was told, the guy was out in Thailand, it was around the early 80s, but it's very rare that I get images, pictures sent in accompanying the story. So I often get guys who'll send me pictures of their girlfriends and they'll say, look, here's a picture of the girl I'm talking about to give the story credibility, but please don't show the picture out on the channel. And I don't. There's a story today. The guy sent me a picture of a very, very beautiful girl. She's very nice. And I've told him so. I said, your girlfriend's beautiful. But you know, I'm not going to show it to you guys to respect his privacy. But this first story, at the end of it, I've made a little montage with some background music. This guy actually took these photographs while he was in Thailand. There's only about 8 of them. There's a couple from a hotel in Bangkok. There's one on Walking Street. There's a couple of his girlfriend, early 80s. And there's a little bit of a twist because in the description of the photographs, he says this was taken from a hotel balcony or somewhere like that, and he didn't know where it was. But I know where it is because I recognize it. And when we get to the end of this story, I'll tell you where that is. So let's not waste any more time because I do get people writing and say, just get on with the story. So I'll do that now. All right, guys, let's jump into the first one. And I hope you're going to enjoy this today.
สวัสดีค่ะ
I have enjoyed listening to a few of your stories that you have read out, so thought, why not? So here is my story. So let's go back to the beginning, all the way back to 1983. I was a young guy of 23 and was working in Saudi Arabia. I had worked in Saudi Arabia when I was only 19 and then went back to Scotland for a year and landed a job in Jeddah in 1981. So would have been just 21 years old at the time. We had free flights home every year, and the 6 months interval in between, we were given the equivalent cost of the flight home in cash to buy a flight wherever you wanted to go. Anyway, having used the first few times to fly home and see friends and family, I was a little fed up of doing this and it was approaching the 6-month interval again. I was chatting to one of my fellow countrymen working for the same company and he suggested Thailand. Oh, Thailand, the Far East. Now, bearing in mind, I was a young Scottish guy that had never been anywhere apart from back to the UK and Saudi Arabia. Travel was not as common back then, or so that it appeared to me. Anyway, the Far East, I thought, wow, what a trip that could be. I had never heard anything about Thailand and was basically not that very worldly. So after some consideration, I said to myself, okay, let's go for it. So I made all the arrangements and the time soon came for the trip to Thailand. The route was Jeddah, Saudi Arabia to Bangkok and was only about 6 or 7 hours flying time. The temperature was pretty much the same. My friend was booked to travel on a later flight and his strict instructions to me as a newbie were, as soon as you land, get a taxi to the hotel, don't stop, don't go anywhere else. The only international airport in Thailand back then was Don Mueang. As Saudi Arabia is officially a dry country, no alcohol was available, although there was the black market and the homemade wine and beer. There was also a distilled alcohol called Sadiq available. Sadiq is a clear white liquid that is basically moonshine. Very strong, but okay if you dilute it down many times. At least it was alcohol and better than not having anything to unwind with. Anyway, I'm going off track, so back to the story. There I was landing at the airport, a young man of 23. I'd never been to anywhere outside of the UK apart from Saudi Arabia. Arriving in what I would call the Far East, Thailand, the land of sandy palm-covered beaches. Yes, I had watched South Pacific, haha. Now, keeping in mind my friend's instructions, I go outside and get a taxi straight to the hotel, and he would arrive a few hours later. I clear customs and arrive at a taxi rank where my friend had said it would be and got a taxi. The fare ending up at nearly the same amount as my friend had said it would be. Sitting in the taxi and chatting with the driver, he asked the usual questions. Where you from? First time Thailand? How long you stay? The taxi driver then said, you want lady? No, I say, thank you, I just want to go to my hotel. I told the driver that I was working in Saudi Arabia. He said, no alcohol, Saudi. You like to drink beer? Well, having just finished a 6-month stint in Saudi and no cool, refreshing beer, I thought that sounds very nice. Okay, I could go a beer or two, I told him. So the taxi driver tells me that he knows a little place, very nice, have ice cold beer. So we arrived somewhere in Bangkok, and I go through this little door. This would have probably been around 2 or 3 in the afternoon. I never really gave the time much thought. This place does not seem like a bar, but coming from Saudi and not having bars to drink in, hidden get-togethers were quite normal. You had to go through normal doorways discreetly that do not look like a bar. So there we were in a little long room that had lots of dining tables and chairs, much like a factory canteen. A lovely ice-cold beer arrived, already poured and looking very inviting. So I sat down, and it was my first beer. Well, actually it was a lager, and it had been 6 months. So I'm sitting around drinking my beer when the taxi man turns and says, you sure you not want lady? Thai lady, very beautiful. Thank you, I say. I'm meeting my friend later on and will probably come back. With that, he claps his hands and about 30 to 40 girls appear and sit down at the tables. Remember, I was only 23 at the time. This was all new to me and quite shocking, with all of these beautiful women in front of me. The taxi driver, who I now suspect was actually the owner of this venue, or at the very least on a backhander, said to me, you can have any one of these girls you like and they will stay with you for as long as you want. I was totally blown away. I could hear my friend's voice in the back of my mind. It kept saying, go straight to your hotel, go straight to your hotel, do not stop, do not pass go. This was a really difficult situation because these girls were very good at what they do, trying to attract my attention each in their own individual way, winking, smiling, raising eyebrows and running tongues along their lips. One was flapping her blouse as if she was warm, while others hitched up their skirts a little. As you can imagine, to a 23-year-old young man, this was like a red rag to a bull. I just couldn't stand it any longer and picked the prettiest one I could see. This girl was absolutely stunning. Long silky black hair and about 5 foot tall, slim like a model and very petite. We were on vacation for just 2 weeks. We had planned to spend the first 3 nights in Bangkok and then head down to Pattaya for the rest of the holiday. I told the driver, look, I'll take her for 3 nights and then I'm off to Pattaya. Is that okay? And of course he replied, yes. Negotiations complete, the pair of us go and we check into my hotel. I unpack, shower, and you can guess the rest. Wonderful is an understatement. A few hours later, the phone in my room rings. It was my friend. He said to me, I told you to go straight to the hotel and you can't even manage that, he said, laughing. He knew I had a girl in the room as the reception told him that 2 people had checked into the room. I checked her in as that was a cheaper option rather than paying a joiner's fee for 3 nights. It was a 2-person room with no additional charges for a second person as long as they were checking in and not joining later as an unchecked in guest to the room. So here we were in Thailand. I met my friend later for something to eat and of course a few cold beers. After dinner, he wanted to go to a place he had read about called Pat Pong. I never heard of Pat Pong and knew nothing about it. I told the girl I was going out with my friend and would probably get back to the hotel in no fit state and that she should come back tomorrow. I gave her a little money for a taxi fare, and even though I had paid for the 3 nights, I felt it was the right thing to do. I asked my friend, what is Pat Pong? Oh, it's just a street that is lined with bars, he tells me. We can just relax and have a few beers and meet up with a few other guys that had flown in earlier from Saudi. They were friends of his, I didn't know them. We grabbed a taxi and I told the driver to head to Pat Pong. We arrived at Pat Pong. It was a busy street even back then. It was full of glittering lights and noise and people everywhere. I just followed my friends and ended up going into one of the first bars on the left. Actually, I can't remember going into any of the bars on the right when I think about it now. Anyway, into the first bar, which is not too busy, we sit down at the bar next to the stage and order a beer. I was just starting to look around and feel this place out when there was a tap on my arm from a small foot. I looked up and there's a pretty girl standing in front of me wearing nothing but a bikini and a smile. We actually arrived right in the middle of showtime in this bar. I can't describe it here, but this is Patpong, so your viewers will have to use their imagination as to what the girl in front of me was doing to entertain customers and which was part of her show. This kind of show totally blew me away. It wasn't exactly sexy, but different from anything I'd witnessed in the past and I suspect I would see in the future. After visiting many bars on that first night out, I ended up going back to the hotel very drunk. I do remember I was so drunk I paid the bar fine to take a girl home with me, but I actually lost her before we got back to the hotel. As I said, I was very drunk. I ended up spending the day with a girl I had taken for 3 days. She showed me a few local sites in the city. It was a nice day, something completely different to me. On the second day, I told the girl that she didn't need to come back and spend any more time with me because I intended to spend time with my friends. I didn't want to offend her, but to be honest, I was bored with her after seeing everything else on offer in Bangkok. Later that evening, the female manager from the first venue called me and asked me if I'd like to take another girl at no extra charge because I didn't like the first one. I politely declined her offer. She told me, okay, that's fine, but you have a credit the next time you visit us. I remember thinking at the time that was very decent of her. I was later to discover that Thai people have a very kind nature and are extremely friendly. All 3 nights out in Bangkok were pretty much the same. However, on the final night, I ended up in the taxi alone while my friend had a girl with him. I told my friend that I was not ready to call it a night yet when we arrived at the hotel. I said to the taxi driver, do you know anywhere where I can grab a few more beers? He said, yes, no problem. Shut the door and I'll take you. We ended up outside this huge fancy building with marble columns and red carpets. I was led inside by a couple of pretty girls and taken to a seating area. This place looked quite high-end. An older Thai lady smiled at me, clapped her hands, and about 30 girls came out from a room and lined up in front of me. She then told me to pick one. I settled for a tall, slim lady with medium wavy hair this time. So that was my first 3 days in Thailand. What an experience. The next day we were off to Pattaya. We took a taxi from Bangkok down to Pattaya. Back then it took a lot longer to get to Pattaya from Bangkok as there were no highways like there is today. Just our luck, about 5 kilometers outside of Pattaya, the taxi broke down and we had to beg a lift from a pickup truck driver. I can't remember the name of the hotel we stayed at, but I'm pretty sure it was around Soi 3 or Soi 4. I have attached a few photos that were taken on a real camera, no smartphones back then, remember, for you to show your viewers. It's funny, it's a funny feeling looking back on these pictures. It almost seems like another lifetime away. You will see what I mean when you look at the pictures. We were booked to stay in Pattaya for 10 or 11 nights. Back then, Pattaya was much smaller than it is today. Most of the activity in Pattaya was located around the beach road and the second road and some sois that connected the two. There was no Soi Buakhao, LK Metro, Tree Town or Soi Pothole back then. It was all fields with buffaloes and a few outlying villages. We hired a couple of small motorbikes to get around on as the roads were much quieter back then with much less traffic. We used to drink in a little bar called Nok Bar. That is no longer there. It was in Soi Diamond, and a little further up there was a Thai boxing ring bar where we would spend our evenings. We would buy a bottle of whiskey or gin and the mixers, and it had your name on it and it was left there for when you returned. I bar-fined a girl from Nok Bar that stayed with me for the rest of my holiday. I can't remember her name after all this time, but I do remember she was great fun and she is in one of the pictures. A lot of the bar girls stayed in a shanty type of place up beyond where Dolphin Roundabout is now and next to a large open air market. There were lots of shacks dotted about with dirt roads. When it was dry they were dusty and when it was wet they were muddy. I remember dropping the girl off as she wanted to wash some clothes. I told her that I would be back to pick her up in a few hours. Sure enough, there she was already dressed like new. Her clothes were beautifully cleaned and ironed, and I remember thinking, I wonder how she managed to do all that in just a few hours and stay clean while living in a shack. And that was that, my trip to Thailand over 40 years ago. The memories of that trip to Thailand by two innocent young men are forever ingrained into my head. What a wonderful place and what wonderful people. I will never forget my short and happy experiences in the land of smiles. The photos I sent you are pick 1 and 3 are some hotel in Bangkok, not sure of the location. Right, well, when you see these guys, I recognise the location, even though they're very, very old photographs. Now, someone is standing on a balcony taking these pictures. Now, if you look carefully, there's two pictures. The first one is actually looking from his balcony onto Soi 4. And the way the camera's facing is away from Sukhumvit Road. So he's in the Nana Hotel. He's looking down at Soi 4. It's a bit hard to recognise, but you'll see it clearly now I've explained it to you. The second one, he's on that same balcony and there's buildings and it just looks like it could be anywhere in Bangkok. Obviously, there's a lot less high-rise buildings, but the building opposite from that picture is actually the Raj Hotel. Pick 8 and 9 go from Pattaya. So that's the girl he was talking about in the story. Pick 8 is on the beach road, heading towards Walking Street. I think it must have been my last day in Pattaya. All right, so let's not keep you guys waiting any longer. I've put a little bit of music in the background. Here's 8 images and I hope you'll enjoy these. I hope you enjoyed those pictures, but it's a shame because there is a part 2 to this story and I record these stories very early in the week, so I make sure I have them ready for Saturday and a few days earlier for the members. And he's actually sent me a part 2 to this story, but it's too late to add it in now, so I will read out his part 2 and I'll try and remember to remind people about this story, but it's going to be in several weeks now because it's gone to the back of the queue. Right, okay, let's jump straight into the second story. No pictures with this, but it's a good story. The following story took place one crazy night a long time ago in Bangkok and in the early 1990s. Some might find it hard to believe, while others will learn a valuable lesson of what not to do in Bangkok. The following story is 100% true. Staring at myself in the mirror, I decided to have some drinks and grab a bite to eat in the hotel bar. After a few drinks, dinner and a few more drinks, I decided there was no way I was going to waste the night hanging around the hotel. I was a single man back then and so determined to check out the famous nightlife. I'd not previously had the pleasure of experiencing Soi Cowboy. It was a rainy evening as I walked out to the street to grab a taxi. When the taxi pulled up, I asked the driver if he spoke English, which he nodded yes, a little. I asked the driver to go to Soi Cowboy. He nodded and away we went. The driver was a quiet little guy, which is not unusual as Thai people can be very cautious and shy, but then all of a sudden the driver spoke up and said to me, "You don't want to go to Soi Cowboy?" Well, I was pretty certain that Soi Cowboy is exactly where I wanted to go. However, in my slightly intoxicated brain, I found the driver's statement pretty amusing. I smiled and thought, just where in the world did this funny little guy think I wanted to go? So I asked him. He said the name of some other famous nightlife area and that it was a bit closer but just as good as Soi Cowboy. So I said, yeah, okay, why not? Let's go, and off we went. After what seemed like 30 minutes, we were close to the area the driver had in mind. As he was pointing through the rainy windshield towards the nightlife area, it appeared a little too quiet for me. I guess I might have investigated a little further, but it just seemed too dark for my interest that night, and so I told the driver I've changed my mind and I want him to take me back to Soy Cowboy. Well, this is when the evening became interesting. I wasn't expecting the driver's response when he said to me, no. In my experience, no is a negative word that Thais seldom speak, but sort of dance around and seem to prefer explaining why they can't do something rather than just say no. I couldn't help myself but to chuckle again, and I said to him, what do you mean no? He said, it's too far away. You can't imagine the look on the driver's face when I told him that Soy Cowboy is where I wanted to go, and if he didn't want to drive me there, to pull over to the side of the road, let me drive. You can ride in the back seat and give me directions how to get there. I don't think he really believed his ears, or that any Farang was crazy enough to suggest such a thing, but sure enough, he pulled over, and just like that, I was behind the wheel and he was in the back seat saying, turn here, go that way, turn there, etc. Now, if you have spent any time in Bangkok, you'll know the motorcycle policemen like to hang out on the corners, sometimes in small groups. Well, this night wasn't any different except for the rain, and every time I drove by a policeman or a small group of them, the taxi driver would duck down and hide from sight. I'm sure he did his best to direct us around the police, but the thing I noticed was that the police always looked to see who was in the passenger seat or the back seat of the taxi, but not once looked to see who was doing the driving. I think they would have put me on the front page news had I been caught. Farang arrested for driving a Bangkok taxi while intoxicated. I admit it wasn't the smartest choice I'd ever made, especially at my time in life. But there I was, under the influence, driving a taxi through Bangkok on a rainy night while the taxi driver gave me directions to Soy Cowboy. By the time we had arrived, we were both laughing at this highly unusual situation and that we had been lucky enough to make it there safely. This was my first time alone in Bangkok. I had never been to Soy Cowboy and really didn't know where in the city I was or what difficulties, if any, there may be to catch a taxi back to the hotel in the very early hours of the morning. So I decided to try and keep the taxi available and asked my new friend if he wanted to come and join me for a beer in one of the bars before he left, which he was happy to accept. While having a beer and taking in the sights, I noticed my new friend was paying special attention to a lovely girl dancing on stage, and I asked him if he liked her, to which he said, yes, very much. Yep, you've guessed it, I paid for the girl, and on top of that, a room next door for the driver and his girl, but told him to give me the taxi keys because I wanted him to drive me back to my hotel a little later. He tossed me the keys and I told him to meet me back at this same bar at 3 a.m. He just smiled and off he went with his girl. I bar hopped until 3 a.m. when my friend showed up with the biggest smile you ever saw on a grown man. I tossed him the keys and said, okay then, now take me back to my hotel. When we arrived at my hotel, my new friend refused to take my money for the use of the cab. He said he had the best night of his life. The following afternoon around 2 p.m. I left the hotel and was going for a short walk to get a bite to eat and a beer. When I arrived at the street curb, my taxi friend pulled up with the window down and said, where do you want to go, boss? I take you wherever you want, no charge. I smiled and told him thanks, but I was just going for a walk nearby and didn't need his services that evening. He handed me his business card and told me anytime I come to Bangkok to call that number and he will drive me wherever I want to go, no charge. He would never forget me. I never did call or see my taxi friend again, and certainly will never forget the craziest night I've ever spent in Bangkok. And there you go, that's it. Only in Thailand, isn't it? He was very, very lucky he didn't get caught, actually. Right, okay, let's jump straight into story number 3. I moved to Pattaya in October and found a great deal on a condo in central Pattaya. This is my 5th trip to Thailand. For the last 5 years, I've been able to stay in Thailand for 1 month out of each year. Normally it's been March or April, but this year I came for the sandbox in Phuket last July. But this time, with no intentions to leave, I contacted an agent and got the retirement visa. When I returned this time, I did my usual partying, drinking, staying out late and playing with freelancers, but it really got old quickly. I got very tired of the Pattaya pay-for-play scene after moving over here in October. I stopped going with girls from bars and seeing freelancers, and I began looking for what I believe that I want, a normal girl. I used Tinder and Thai Friendly, but I found that many of the Thai girls on there were the same as the girls in the bars, working. Whenever I would match with someone on Tinder, I would straight away ask a couple of qualifying questions to find out if she was a freelancer. Well, on January 21st, I was sitting at my condo and I swiped right on a beautiful girl and it was a match. She had a nice smile and a lovely curvy body. The first thing I wrote to her on Tinder was, "I love your smile." She wrote back something and then I returned with, "Can I make you my girlfriend?" This was a qualifying question because a freelancer girl will immediately say, "I'm not looking for a boyfriend, I'm looking for customers." This girl just thought it was very forward and assumed that I was joking. She told me she was from Bangkok and only in Pattaya for the day. I asked for her contact information and explained that I often get to Bangkok and would like to see her when I visit. She asked if we could meet now. I replied, "Absolutely," straight away. I got on my motorcycle and I headed over to Jomtien Beach. When I met her, I saw that smile. She really turned the smile on for me and we went to the sandbar on the beach for a drink. I'll skip a lot of the details other than to say we had a really nice conversation and she spoke pretty good English because she works in a hotel in Bangkok. I asked if I could take her for dinner and she said yes. I told her that I'm going to take her to a really nice place and she told me that she had not showered. I told her that my apartment was between here and the restaurant and suggested that we go there and we both shower and then go to dinner. She agreed and drove her small pickup truck following me to where I live in central Pattaya. We each showered, giving each other the necessary privacy that my small apartment would allow, and then went to a really nice restaurant right on the beach. It was expensive and romantic, but I certainly didn't mind. It was a joy being with her, talking with her, and seeing that smile brightly shine back at me. After dinner, we went back to my condo, had a couple of drinks, and she spent the night with me. She was the most amazing girl that I've ever been with, even among all of those professional freelancers that I have experienced over the last 5 years. For me to experience a woman's genuine love is immensely better than being with a woman who's been paid for her services. There's no comparison. She had to leave the next day and I gave her 1,000 baht for gas money. She later told me that made her feel bad because maybe I thought she was a bad woman or something like that. But I made it very clear it's just because I thought that her pickup truck would use a lot of gas and she shouldn't think I was paying her for something else. I stayed in touch with her and, as a matter of fact, couldn't stop thinking about her. I arranged to visit Bangkok the following week and she stayed with me at my hotel for 2 days during her days off from her work. There's such a lack of train wreck element in this story that I worry your viewers will be bored, so I will just say that it's a month later and we are in a relationship. We tell each other I love you on a regular basis. I have never been so happy. We will continue to keep seeing each other as often as we can until my lease in Pattaya has ended. Then I don't know, I could reconsider living here in Pattaya. There's plenty of time to think it over. Not only is she not a professional or a freelancer, but I am only the second man that she has ever been with. Her first boyfriend, who was a Thai guy. They almost got married, but she figured out that he was cheating on her. The first guy that she was with was a man who was married. She was with him a year before she found out that he was married. I have never been happier and satisfied and hope to stay with her forever. I believe that lightning has struck. I feel so lucky to have met such a beautiful woman. When we spend 2 days together on her days off, we have such a fun time and never get bored of each other's company. We love to sit around or go to dinner or a club. It doesn't matter as it's all fun to us. If subscribers are interested, she is 31 and I am 60. She told me that when she first saw me, she thought I looked better than my pictures. This, of course, made me very happy to hear. Cheers, Peter, for reading my story. I'll attach a photo or two for you to see, but not for display on your channel. Yeah, he did send me a couple of pictures, and yeah, she's very, very pretty, guys. I wish I could show them because she's real pretty. But I'll just I'll put a comment in here. This is something that you'll find very often. Guys who have been going to Pattaya for years during their working lives, they'll go for a month, maybe 6 weeks at maximum, maybe only 2 weeks. But when they go there, they make the most of what Pattaya's got to offer, and they'll date as as many girls as they can over there over the 2 weeks. You know what I mean by dating. And they can't, when they leave, they can't wait to get back for the next time to do it all over again. And they do this for years. But what's a common trait is you'll find guys who finally retire and they have enough money to go out to Thailand to live. They get a nice condo in Jomtien, somewhere like that, and they go for it like they did when they were on holiday. And what happens, it does start to wear off. I've seen it many times, and they get to the point where they just don't want to do that anymore. They want to get into a relationship, and this is what's happened to this guy. And good luck to him, good luck to the lady. I hope it all works out. All right, let's get into our fourth and final story this day.
สถานีต่อไปนานา Next station นานา
There is a twist to this story and not what you would expect. When I retired after working for about 45 years, I decided to celebrate my retirement and to travel to the Far East for the first time in my life. Having spent a lot of time in Europe, Africa and the UAE on business and pleasure, I was attracted to Thailand, and since I am a scuba diver, I decided Phuket and Koh Phi Phi will be a great place to spend my visit. I was single at the time after 3 failed marriages. I managed to accumulate a reasonable amount of money to keep me comfortable for the rest of my life. I flew into Phuket planning to stay in Patong for a few days before going to Phi Phi, as any inquisitive person will do. I went to Bangla Road and found cheap beer, good-looking women and party time. I am not that much into the drinking scene, but it is a great way to relax and wash this work thing off me. I brought quite a few ladies' drinks and got hugged a lot, normal in Thailand I was told. I must say, not half bad to receive that much attention from lovely people. There was one very pretty girl who was not that forward and somewhat reserved. This appealed to me and I started chatting with her more. This happened over a few evenings with me being drawn to her bar. One thing led to another, and wow, I have not had that much bedroom activity in a very long time. I postponed my visit to Phi Phi Island and stayed in Patong a little longer. Our relationship grew, and although her English was not that good, we managed to communicate using body and sign language and with help from our friends at Google with Translate. She is a girl from a rural Isan village, been in Patong for 8 years at that time, worked as a waitress, lost her job, had to do something to support mother and her family in her home village. Never been married and no kids. She's not a child either, being on the right side of 30 years of age. Yeah, I know what you're saying, normal BS stories, but I have these verified through a PI firm in Bangkok. I fell in love with Thailand, the weather, the food, and of course the people. Totally drawn in by the whole experience. I did spend a few weeks on Phi Phi Island diving and then had to go back home. We communicated on a daily basis, even though the time difference between my home in the USA and Thailand is 15 hours. The relationship blossomed. I supported her to stop being a bar girl due to her health, too much drinking and other things like drunk farangs. She stopped drinking Thai whiskey and took up English classes. Yeah, I know what you're thinking, BS again. But I verified this through my PI friends that everything was happening the way we discussed it will. I travelled back to Patong 2 months later. We flew up to her village in Isan and I applied for a Thai elite visa, which I got after about 2 months. She stayed at her village with her mother and did not return to Patong. After I got my visa, I rented out my house in the USA and travelled back to her village. We rented a house there and started looking for some land. We found some which she bought and I sponsored building a house on her land. We grew vegetables to keep us busy and are producing vegetables for our own consumption and the local market. We added a few pigs and some chickens and we are now living the dream. I lived most of my working career with expensive cars, $500 a head sushi and 5-star vacations, but always dreamt of the simple life. I lost weight, my blood sugar is down, I am fit and healthy. I embrace Buddhism but need to watch my consumption of that deliciously spicy Isan food. Now for the twist. 2 people from different backgrounds meeting by chance and through mutual respect and needs managed to make a success of a loving relationship. A big fat American farang and a third world country girl who could hardly speak English squatting on the floor to eat with her bare hands. Never travelled outside of her home region, never heard of Beethoven, nor even knew what the stock exchange was. We are living very happily together. We will not get married, no need to, as there will not be children. She is 27 years my junior, and I know in a few years' time I will probably have to look at finding a site for my grave. She will keep the house and I will leave her 10 million Thai baht so that she is looked after. A small price to pay for the love, care and happiness she has given me now. There are scammers everywhere, and most of these girls working in the entertainment industry, bar girls, freelancers, go-go dancers and massage girls, do it for survival and will gladly stop working in that industry if there is a way out. In the meantime, they will make the most of it and get as much money as possible from us Farangs with our open wallets. I know my story is different to the norm, but I thought your viewers might be interested in my story. That's great, isn't it? That's a success story, and the one before that was a success story. It wasn't boring at all. If the guy who wrote it and he's watching this, it's very nice to read a story actually where it's people don't get burnt. Just on this story, one thing, I don't want to be negative, but I've got to put my I've got to put my bit in as always. Now he is right in what he says. These girls are desperate. They're working in the bars because they need to make money to send home to families, mother, father, siblings, and some of them have children. And what he's saying here, given the chance. They would rather not be there. That is true, but he's also saying, you know, if you give an opportunity to say, take a girl out of a bar and offer her a different life, she'll take that. Okay, that part of the story is true, but what you've got to look out for, guys, while there are some genuine girls who will do what this girl in this story has done, there are a lot more girls who will play you. So they'll tell you, yes, I'm going to live in my village. They'll accept your money being sent every month and money for a house, whatever it is, but they'll have several sponsors, boyfriends, and they'll be playing the game, and they're in the game to win it. So if you go to Thailand and you meet a girl that you'd like to have a relationship, don't jump into it, guys. Research it, because a lot of guys have been burnt. They've lost cash simply because they've assumed that when they've taken that girl out of the bar, she's very, very happy because she doesn't have to work at the bar, which she is. But, you know, it's all about money at the end of the day. And the more money they have, it's never enough, actually. You know, a lot of them play the guys. And as I say, I don't want to end in a negative way, but you've got to be a bit sharp when you go out there, guys. Don't get taken in. All right. So 4 great stories again. I hope you enjoyed the pictures. As I say, I'm still looking for a Western woman to send me in her story. I won't mention it again after this week, but it would be nice. I might get in touch with Katie again. Do you remember the American lady who went to Pattaya with her husband because he got assigned a job there and he ran off with a 20-year-old? She was very adult about that. We had a great interview. That's on the channel if you'd like to go back and look at that. I might try and get Katie back on the channel and just ask her for a few more of her experiences in Pattaya. That would be quite enjoyable. All right, guys. So that's it until next week, as always. I will be here for the live stream on Friday. There'll be 4 more stories on Saturday. I always end in the same way. You know the drill by now. So until next Saturday, guys, thanks for joining me again. It's always a pleasure, and I'll have some more stories for you next week.